People, Deluded, I'm back again. Thank you very much for tuning back in. As you lot know, I'm quite a very committed YouTuber. You get videos in many different environments. You get videos to the point where I'm tired. You're probably tired of seeing my face, but it's my lunch break. I'm back. For you that like these Soho pigeons, they're here. We're actually moving offices, so this will be one of my last videos in this sort of environment this week, people. So yeah, we'll have to see what the area of Camden is now saying, which is a very mysterious area, northwest London. I mean, Camden's a very unique place. There's something for everybody. The nightlife is a bit but moving away from that, there's some stuff to speak about in relation to Arsenal. Not the most groundbreaking of things, but nonetheless, let me get my thoughts off my chest. Thank you very much for listening. First and foremost, coming from specifically Le 10 Sport and a lot of emerging reports coming out of France, Aubameyang, well, let me just read it out better yet. The Arsenal hierarchy have had positive talks with Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang regarding a contract extension. And then it goes on to say the player wants to see if we're going to get Champions League. Now, it's a difficult one. Obviously, when I hear this report, I have to take it with a pinch of salt, because 1 minute Aubameyang's definitely staying, then he's definitely going, then it's Willie, then he won't. His contract is up at the end, well, more or less at the end of the next season. You might as well say the end of this season, because it might as well be when you've got someone who's the league's top goal scorer on 17 goals, despite being suspended for, what, 3 games or so, playing on the left-hand side. Obviously, we know Aubameyang is goals. I have him down as a natural-born goal scorer in the same way I think Martinelli's got a bit of that and Aguero. But when you look at it, how much of a natural goal scorer was Aubameyang? Because you go back over 5 years ago, he was playing at Saint Etienne, AC Milan. They weren't really doing it. So obviously a lot of that is testament to him, testament to what Dortmund was doing, not just him with Lewandowski and whatnot. He's become a terrific pro. I don't have it to hand, but his minutes to goals ratio is one of the best. Since he's joined the league, I think only Salah is up there for goals scored, people, which is 49. Again, who knows in general, at this point, I don't even know how many goals he has for Arsenal in total. And I've said it in a previous video, but you can imagine it's something pretty good. I mean, in 25 games, he's got 17 goals. And I think people underrate how much, it doesn't matter if you're fighting relegation, trying to go for the league, a 20 league goal striker is a top forward regardless. And I said this not to criticise Lacazette, but I said this last season, he has to get 20 league goals. Lacazette, if Aubameyang was to leave, we'd struggle because he's got other qualities, but you know, it's not Aubameyang. I did think Lacazette's creativity was overstated. I do think his goal scoring is exaggerated. He's a good player, but what I mean by that is Aubameyang's is an assurance. In August, when you're thinking of the new season, you've got Leno, who's a competent keeper. Ideally, we'd have another centre-half or two, regardless of the form. Credit to Louise, Mustafi and whatnot, but it must be a manager's dream to know that you've got a striker that's going to score you goals, a winger that can do this, a defender that can do that. And Aubameyang is one of the assurances in our team, one of the most consistent players, not just for Arsenal, in the league. I think people, and myself, I forget about it at times as well. I don't want to jinx it, but considering he's 30, turning 31, the man's never injured. I know he spent a period of his life in Italy, so maybe because you know Italy do this thing when it comes to longevity and extending players' careers. So potentially, you know, he could have learned some useful tips with that. Obviously, in terms, just away from being a terrific footballer, I don't need to sing his praises. He's a leader in the dressing room. He's not someone. He's someone that I think will shout and raise his voice if it came to that. I don't think he's a pum pum by any chance, but I don't think he's one of these old school sort of captains we've become accustomed to in England, where he's bollocking everyone and carrying on. He's someone that will say things that need to be said, someone that clearly leads by example, someone that stands up to be counted. Obviously, I think languages is overstated, because football's a universal language and everybody gets on with everyone, but you can't underestimate the fact that he is a German speaker, a Spanish speaker, French speaker, and a couple other languages, all of which you can see many different, if the players aren't necessarily from that country, have played in that league. So he's someone that, you know, can be a pillar that players can come to, and he's clearly a big voice in the dressing room. Obviously, with how Aubameyang is, he's very humble, but he likes flashy stuff. He's in the right place in London. Obviously, the Champions League thing. Now, again, if I'm Aubameyang, I'd leave. I would leave. It's a difficult one. If he is going to stay at Arsenal, I can only imagine it's because of testament to Arteta and what he believes Arteta's doing. He feels comfortable with the players. He feels comfortable in London. You know, obviously, money, we don't want to speak about money, but it's a big thing. He's 30. This is probably the last real big chance of a big deal. If you're not going to secure it at Arsenal, secure it elsewhere because of his form and because of his contract. So he'd have to get a nice deal. I think his agent has to push for 3 years with an option of a 4 year. 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 4 year buys into what Arteta's saying, and he's comfortable. Obviously, we could be sitting here a year from now and winning a trophy. We could, in theory, win Europa, win FA Cup and things like that. Does Aubameyang want to do that? I'm sure he wants to play in the Europeans elite competition and potentially win the Premier League or a league title elsewhere, which obviously is going to alert a lot of teams, even if it's unrealistic as to getting them to his availability. And obviously a team, you know, a team abroad might think, you know, he could be a decent short-term thingy. And for me, what I would probably leave as well if I was Aubameyang, obviously if he wants to be the pillar, the captain for these young players to help come through the team, and he's comfortable in Arsenal, then he should stay. But even if he buys into what Arteta's saying and he fully does people with all his heart and whatnot, and the rebuild does happen, in 2 years' time he's going to be 32, 33. That's because I think he's 31 in July. That's great for Saka, Martinelli, assuming Saka's still here with his contract, and all of these Nelsons and all of these other young players. But he's going to be 32. It's completely different, but it's almost similar to Thierry Henry when we moved to the Emirates, and that we had a young squad, and the team was going in a different direction. Can Aubameyang help us get into the Champions League? Of course. Obviously, I do think Champions League is a factor, but I think it's a tough one because he's comfortable in London. Clearly, he's got a nice home here. It could be worth retiring here and you know, seeing out your best days. But if the opportunity does come to the Barças, the Madrids, the Inters, all of these clubs, then he's got to take it. How true the Champions League thing is, I'm not too sure, because prior to, even with Arteta coming in, Aubameyang's no idiot. He must think that getting top four is a big ask, but you never know with the way we're moving as a team, with the togetherness, with the tactics and whatnot. While I personally think it can't happen, you never know. From what I get with this as well is that clearly if we don't get Champions League, he might keep it moving, but I think it's a difficult one. I think there's reasons for Aubameyang to stay at this club, and there's equal reasons for him to leave. I literally think it's 50-50, because if you look at it once again from the flip side of things, you know, comfortability, feeling importance, the London life and things, then you stay at Arsenal. The opportunity to win trophies because he's not getting any younger, maybe get a few more bob in his pocket, you can't begrudge him because he's done everything he can, people. Obviously, I think listen, you can sit here in 2 years from now and struggle to get Aubameyang off the wages, but he deserves to be paid that. Potentially Lacazette with his form, his future's up for debate, but you get him and you get Lacazette and Ozil off the books, then you can keep Aubameyang for a year or two and develop the other team and look for a striker long term if Eddie isn't going to be the natural placement for Aubameyang in getting all these goals. So we'll have to see. Away from that, like you guys have already seen, we've been linked with Thomas Partey, but apparently now we're not willing to pay his £50 million release clause. As you can see, I've got some conflicting reports. Some people say we're willing to, some people say we're not. Some people say his priority is to stay at Atletico and sign an extension, in which it says, although Arsenal are very serious about signing him, Partey is still in talks with Atletico about renewing his deal. And he said once upon a time, Atletico is my home, the club that gave me everything. My club is talking to the club. My agent is talking to the club about a renewal. I hope everything goes well. So we'll have to see what happens in that regards. But I've seen, courtesy of Sports Witness, another midfielder who Dortmund are going to try and go for. I've seen everything from 40 million to 60 million. If I humour this rumour and say we was going to pay the 50 million release clause and Rennes would entertain this, then we need to go for Camavinga. He's got a lot of developing to do. He's been linked with Madrid. I mean, Dortmund, with what they did with Sancho and Highland, they've been linked with him and they're serious about him. Could be a great club for him to go to. But I think he ties in terms of being young. He's obviously got a lot of potential in midfield. He can be a box-to-box. He could be a ball-winning midfielder. That's what we need. Obviously, partly he's got the experience, and I guess short-term he'd probably be the better player. But I think Camavinga's a great player. And if it is true, if Dortmund, I mean, if Rennes were to concede 50 to 60 million euros, then I think we should go for him. But you've seen they're prepared to sell him for 100, and why wouldn't they? In hindsight, potentially even got short-changed on Ousmane Dembele because he went to Dortmund before the mad thing happened. So you never know, man. They're sitting on a calm investment there. Apparently Madrid want him. So once Madrid wants you, you never know what could happen. But if there's a glimmer of hope, I would go for him. I mentioned this in a previous vid, but I'm not too sure if I said the specifics. But Thierry Henry, in relation to potentially being Arsenal manager one day, he has said, I do dream of managing Arsenal, but I also dream of running up to the court and doing a slam dunk. It doesn't mean it will happen. So yeah. Moving on, and Perez has been speaking in relation to Pepe and Martinelli. On Martinelli, he has said he's the revelation. I think he'll confirm this, and he'll be a very important player for the club. He's not going anywhere. He's part of the players who have real potential, on who we will lean on in years to come. It's important players like him, and that's fully facts. In relation to Pepe, he said, and Pepe's alleged struggles this season, even though he's been involved in 4 goals in the last week. He's been involved in 10 goals in the Premier League all season. I'm not saying he's perfect. I'm not saying there's not constructive criticism, because there is, but people do overdo it a bit and write players off. Not just him, but Sane was written off after 6 months in the Premier League, and there's been many a player that's had the same. So we never know. I'm not saying he's going to be world class, but I don't see any reason as to why Pepe cannot be a player that for this club cannot get 10 goals, 10 assists near enough in all competitions from the wide positions. I think obviously he's got to change up his play in several things and constructive criticism, but I think he's finding his feet, and I think he's going to be a decent player. But Perez himself has said it's not necessarily complicated, it's just long. I know that situation and I've gone through it. Perez, I mean, if Perez and Henry, I'm not saying he's going to reach them levels, but imagine if Perez and Henry were written off after 6 months in their Premier League tenures, people, what would have been said? Moving on, it said, I know that situation, I've gone through it. People are impatient, they want the performance to be quick, especially when there's a change like this one. The Premier League is very complicated. Every weekend is a fight, especially when you play against the so-called weak teams, which is 100% facts, people. Keeping up with Pepe and Charlie Nicholas, former Arsenal player, depending on how you interpret what he's saying, has had some interesting words, and I do think it's a bit harsh considering Pepe's recent form. He said he doesn't believe he should start the second leg. He said, I do think this is a certain win for Arsenal. I do not think this is a certain win for Arsenal. Mikel Arteta will sit and read into the fact that they let in 2 against Everton. Leno gets Arsenal out of a lot of holes, but he did slip up for the second goal. Joe Willock and Alexandre Lacazette will probably come in. You have to keep Aubameyang in for his goals. Will Nicolas Pepe get another run? Probably. Does he deserve it? Probably not. I will look at Martinelli, and that's a bit harsh. That he doesn't deserve it. That's very harsh, man. I think with Pepe's coming into his own, I agree with what you said. Martinelli deserves to start. In my preview, said Aubameyang should be the one through the middle. For me, it should be Lacazette. That's the one that's given the day off. But now, after doing my review, I do think Aubameyang will probably either be moved to the left-hand flank or dropped. And I do think Lacazette will play, in which the one of Saka, when Saka moves to midfield, we have to be prepared for moves back to midfield. Saka, Nelson, Pepe, Aubameyang, even one day Lacazette, all of these players, someone will miss out. Even Eddie alluded to it, someone will miss out, and that's a gift and a curse. There's different climates called for different people, and I do think it is a bit harsh that he said he doesn't probably deserve another chance. Martinelli, listen, I think Martinelli should start, but Pepe has done all right. Like, really needs to calm it down there, Nicholas, man. We've been linked with Jonathan David, Canadian guy that's playing his football right now in Belgium. He's been linked with a couple of players, and his agent seems to be very sensible in that it might not be the wisest of him to move to necessarily a big club or a top 6 club or something like that. He's better off going to a more competitive league where he could develop. He's been linked with Leon, which could be somewhere for him to hone his traits before moving on elsewhere. His agent has said, take Arsenal, we'll talk about a top 5 team in the Premier League. The next step has to be a smart one. So maybe that's too big a jump at the moment. The whole picture has to be right. In what field does the club play? How does the club feel about Jonathan? How sure is he of a base pitch? An immediate step might be better sometimes. I understand that Gent would still like to keep Jonathan, but the club would also like if Gent got him for €0 million and now will leave for a record amount. So clearly that's someone that's speaking of, the moves to the top European teams, and not that we are, but the top European teams and leagues will come. Right now it's development. Right now he's playing games at Gent. Can he go somewhere where he can take an intermediate step up, develop a bit, and then move on? You look at Highland, he was linked with United, Madrid, many clubs that a lot of us, if it wasn't Arsenal, I mean, as a kid, I didn't say I dreamt of Man United, but if Arsenal I dreamed of obviously playing for Arsenal, but at the same time you do kind of open your ears to the points potentially of playing for Man United and all of these clubs. Even if I'm a 24-year-old failed footballer, failed grassroots footballer. I know what Manchester United means. I know what Liverpool means. I know what Madrid means. I know what Barca means. All of these clubs, whether you're a fan or not. And it's very easy as a footballer to not get gassed off that. But you look at Highland, he's gone to a club which has a track record of developing great young players. And if he was to need 2 guide points, Aubameyang and Lewandowski specifically for strikers, he goes there, he stays there for anything from 2 to 4 years, develops to the way he started off as he left Salzburg, continues, then moves to the Premier League and things will come. You hear he wants to play for City one day, Leeds one day, wants to play in Spain the other, play Premier League in general the other, Leeds actually one day. These things will happen if he develops people, do you get it? So that might be something Jonathan David needs to consider, but only he can answer that, and I think that's the right step. But in relation to all my talking points, I don't have anything more to add, so I'm going to get out of here. People, as usual, DG, I'm out.